A conservative woman walked into a hospital for a simple checkup, and walked out a hero. But in between, she was publicly humiliated by a liberal doctor, caught in a storm of politics, panic, and poetic justice. What happened next will leave you speechless. It started with a chilling phrase. "You're not welcome here, Ms. Leavitt." The fluorescent hospital lights buzzed overhead as Caroline Leavitt entered the outpatient wing beside her husband. The visit was supposed to be routine, a follow-up appointment for a minor shoulder injury. Nothing political. No media. Just a quiet afternoon at a local hospital. Caroline, a prominent conservative voice and former congressional candidate, was used to the occasional side-eye in public. Her outspoken positions on national television had earned her both loyal supporters and loud critics. But never in a setting like this. As they approached the nurse's station to check in, a man in a white coat locked eyes with her from across the hallway. He wasn't just any staff member, he was Dr. Neil Carter, a senior physician known for his progressive activism online. His Twitter profile was filled with hashtags like #resist and #healthcareforall, and his bio proudly declared him an unapologetic advocate for truth and progress. He strode toward them with a smirk, arms folded across his chest. And then, without hesitation or warning, he dropped the bombshell. "You're not welcome here, Ms. Leavitt." The hallway froze. A nurse behind the counter blinked in disbelief. A patient waiting in a wheelchair looked up, confused. Even Caroline's husband paused mid-step, unsure if he'd heard right. Caroline turned slowly, meeting the doctor's glare. "Excuse me," she said, calmly but firmly. That's when Dr. Carter unleashed his fury. "You represent everything that's wrong with this country," he barked, voice rising. "Bigotry. Division. Outdated policies that hurt people like my patients." The words hit like shrapnel. His tone was sharp, calculated, and full of contempt. He wasn't here to debate. He was here to humiliate. Right there in front of nurses, other patients, and most painfully, her own husband. Her husband stepped forward. "Hey, that's completely uncalled for." But the doctor wasn't finished. He jabbed a finger toward Caroline. "You think just because you show up with a smile and a camera-ready face that people forget what you stand for? We haven't forgotten. Not here. Not in this hospital." Gasps rippled through the hallway. Someone whispered, "Is that really happening?" Another pulled out their phone to record. Caroline stood frozen, her political armor rattled by the unexpected assault. Her lips parted, but no words came. Not because she didn't have a response, she'd debated congressmen on live TV, but because the location, the context, the cruelty caught her off guard. Hospitals are supposed to be neutral ground. Places of healing. Places where politics take a back seat to human compassion. But not today. Today, a doctor chose to turn a medical facility into a stage, and Caroline Leavitt was the unwilling target. And as the seconds ticked by, one thing was clear to everyone watching. This wasn't a disagreement. It was a public ambush. And no one could have predicted what would happen just 10 minutes later. To understand why things escalated so quickly, we need to look at the political tension brewing just beneath the surface. Caroline Leavitt wasn't just any public figure. She had quickly become one of the most recognizable young conservative voices in America. A former press official in the Trump administration, a congressional candidate, and a fierce critic of leftist ideology, Caroline had built a reputation for unapologetically speaking her mind. Whether it was on national TV panels or viral interviews, she never backed down from a fight. And with that, she drew admiration and intense opposition. In today's hyperpolarized climate, public figures aren't just seen as individuals, they're walking symbols. To some, Caroline represented a voice of reason, tradition, and courage. To others, she was a threat to progress, someone whose views clashed with modern narratives on gender, healthcare, and social equity. Enter Dr. Neil Carter, a respected physician in the medical field, but also a self-proclaimed social justice warrior. His Twitter feed read like a political campaign. He had amassed thousands of followers by posting fiery threads criticizing conservative legislation, mocking Republican lawmakers, and calling out what he called toxic traditionalism. He had tweeted about Caroline before, mocking her speeches, calling her views dangerous and outdated, and even retweeting clips of her debates with sarcastic commentary. To him, she wasn't just a political figure, she was a personification of everything he fought against. So when Caroline and her husband walked into his hospital that day, he didn't see two ordinary people seeking medical help. He saw an opportunity. An opportunity to turn keyboard activism into a real-life confrontation. He saw it as a moment to strike a blow for his beliefs, to use his voice, regardless of where he was or the role he was supposed to play. In his mind, this wasn't just a patient, it was a chance to humiliate an ideological opponent. But what Dr. Carter forgot, perhaps blinded by his own righteousness, was that hospitals are sacred places. Places where politics should be left at the door. Where patients are humans first, and healthcare professionals are trusted to provide care, not condemnation. The internet has blurred lines. We live in an age where virtual feuds become personal, and public figures are dehumanized to memes, avatars, and hashtags. And yet, behind the political labels, there are real people, with families, with emotions, and with dignity. When Dr. Carter launched his ambush on Caroline, he wasn't just breaking medical ethics, he was crossing a line that even the most politically engaged audience could recognize. And here's where fate, or perhaps karma, came into play. Because while the doctor was still basking in his victory, still smirking from the reaction he'd triggered in the hallway, he had no idea what was about to unfold. Just 10 minutes later, the very hospital he tried to turn into a soapbox would be thrown into chaos. And the one person he tried to humiliate would become the unexpected hero of the hour. After the shocking confrontation in the hallway, Caroline Leavitt and her husband stood in stunned silence. But they weren't about to escalate the situation. Choosing composure over conflict, they calmly asked the receptionist if another physician could take over the appointment. The nurse at the desk, visibly shaken by what she'd just witnessed, looked apologetic but firm. "I'm so sorry, ma'am, but we're short-staffed today. Dr. Carter is the only attending in this department right now." Caroline glanced at her husband. He nodded quietly, unspoken agreement to stay, for now, and get through this with dignity. Meanwhile, the air around them was thick with unease. Patients whispered behind clipboards. Nurses exchanged glances. One staff member was seen quietly recording part of the incident on her phone. No one was laughing. No one cheered. The reaction was clear, this wasn't political bravery, it was professional misconduct. A young nurse, barely out of residency, quietly walked over to Caroline and whispered, "That was out of line. Politics shouldn't interfere with patient care. I'm so sorry you had to go through that." Caroline thanked her with a nod, but the tension was far from over. Because that's when everything changed. Without warning, the quiet buzz of medical machines was drowned out by a shrill, blaring alarm. Red lights began flashing in corridors. Computer monitors went black. Nurses' pagers vibrated with emergency codes. Doctors rushed from every direction, panic written across their faces. The hospital's digital infrastructure had gone down. Completely. Within seconds, it was clear, this wasn't a drill. A cyber attack had just hit the hospital. Systems that controlled patient data, vital medical records, digital communications, and even some life support units were suddenly unresponsive. Some areas of the hospital switched to backup power, but others descended into chaos. Caroline and her husband were rushed aside as staff frantically tried to manage the unfolding emergency. Nurses barked orders. Phones rang off the hook, then stopped working entirely. Doctors who had relied on digital tablets to track patient care were now scrambling for paper charts that hadn't been used in years. And in the middle of it all stood Dr. Neil Carter, the same man who had mocked Caroline minutes earlier. But now, the swagger was gone. His face was pale. His hands trembled as he tried, and failed, to access lockdown medical software. He looked lost, overwhelmed, completely out of his depth. The digital systems he relied on for everything had vanished. And unlike his confidence in launching political attacks, he had no answers for a real-world crisis. Nurses began turning to one another. "What do we do now?" someone asked. "How do we get vitals? How do we update records?" The room that once echoed with Dr. Carter's arrogance was now filled with uncertainty, and the realization that no one, not even the loudest voice in the room, was in control anymore. But help was about to come from the most unexpected place. Amid the chaos, while hospital alarms blared and staff darted through hallways in a panic, one couple stood remarkably composed, Caroline Leavitt and her husband. Caroline's years in politics had taught her how to stay calm under pressure, but it was her husband who truly stepped into the spotlight. A seasoned tech consultant with years of experience in cybersecurity, he recognized the signs of a system-wide breach immediately. Without waiting for an invitation, he approached the nearest nurse station. "I work in IT," he said quickly. "Let me help. You're under a ransomware attack, your systems have been locked. You need to isolate the infected devices and reroute through backups." The staff hesitated for only a second. Then, desperate for solutions, they nodded and ushered him into the back. Within minutes, Caroline's husband was working side by side with the hospital's overwhelmed tech team, guiding them through emergency protocols. He advised them to disconnect certain servers, isolate corrupted access points, and prioritize restoring critical systems, like life support monitoring and patient communication. Meanwhile, Caroline didn't just stand by. She stepped up in a different way. With the intercoms down and many patients growing restless or scared, she began moving through the waiting areas, speaking calmly, organizing people, and relaying updates from staff. She comforted the elderly, reassured parents with young children, and helped nurses reassign patients to different wings. Her poise in the middle of panic made a visible impact. The very people who, minutes earlier, weren't sure how to react to her presence now watched in awe. Whispers spread through the hospital. "That's Caroline Leavitt, isn't it? She's actually helping. She didn't walk out. She's right here with us." One nurse turned to another and said quietly, "You know what? I don't care about her politics right now. That's leadership." And then came the ultimate twist of fate. As the IT department combed through system logs to trace the source of the breach, a pattern emerged. It hadn't been some advanced hacker group. No complex infiltration. The likely cause? A single phishing email, sent that morning to hospital staff. A deceptive message disguised as a routine internal memo, containing a malicious link. It had been opened by one person. Dr. Neil Carter. Yes, the same doctor who just hours earlier had berated Caroline Leavitt for being a danger to the country, had, through his carelessness, put the hospital's entire infrastructure at risk. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. He had tried to publicly shame Caroline, to strip her of dignity in front of staff and patients. But now, he stood frozen in the corner, pale and silent, as his colleagues pieced together the truth. The so-called hero of his own political stage had become the weak link in the hospital's defenses. And the people he had tried to humiliate? They had just become the hospital's unlikely saviors. In the hours that followed the cyber attack, the hospital slowly regained control of its systems. Backup protocols kicked in. With Caroline's husband working shoulder to shoulder with IT specialists and support from emergency tech teams, vital systems were restored. Patient data was protected, critical equipment brought back online, and staff communications re-established. No lives were lost, but the near miss had left a deep scar. And when the dust settled, there were questions that demanded answers. The hospital administration launched an internal review almost immediately. The digital audit confirmed what IT had suspected: the breach had originated from a phishing email, carelessly opened by none other than Dr. Neil Carter. Combined with his earlier public outburst, his future at the hospital was now in serious jeopardy. He was suspended pending an investigation, not only for his critical role in compromising hospital security, but for his grossly unprofessional conduct toward a patient, behavior witnessed by both staff and visitors. Word of his actions had already spread internally, and it didn't take long for staff to come forward. Multiple employees submitted written statements, not just condemning the doctor's behavior, but praising Caroline Leavitt and her husband for their calm, leadership, and willingness to help in a moment of true crisis. She didn't yell. She didn't storm out. She stayed and helped, one nurse wrote. Her husband saved our systems from total failure, said another staff member. For the hospital, the message was clear: this wasn't just a PR disaster, it was a wake-up call. But the real tidal wave was still to come. When the story broke on social media, it exploded. Videos captured during the incident, including the doctor's outburst and the chaos during the breach, were posted online. And just as quickly, a new hashtag began trending. #CarolineStrong. People across the political spectrum shared the story. Commenters flooded platforms with praise, pointing out the dramatic irony of it all. A liberal doctor tried to publicly humiliate a conservative woman, and then had to rely on her husband to stop a disaster. That's poetic justice. You can't fake grace under pressure. Caroline didn't talk about leadership, she showed it. The incident, which had started as an attempt to shame Caroline, had become a defining moment of public redemption. Even many who didn't align with her politically admitted, her actions spoke louder than the doctor's words ever could. Caroline herself remained mostly quiet in the aftermath. She didn't tweet or hold a press conference. She didn't fan the flames. But a few days later, she posted a simple message on her official page. Just one sentence. Sometimes, character speaks louder than politics. The post went viral instantly. In a world too often dominated by outrage, division, and performative politics, this story reminded people of something deeper: that true leadership reveals itself in crisis, not in soundbites or applause lines. And on that chaotic day in a hospital hallway, it was Caroline Leavitt, not her critic, who emerged with dignity intact and character on full display. If you think political bias has no place in professional spaces, especially hospitals, hit that like button and comment your thoughts below. And if you believe respect should come before ideology, subscribe for more stories that the mainstream won't tell you. Thanks for watching.